So, in the last two lectures, we have seen various aspects of the undelivered speech of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, which is famous as the Annihilation of the Caste. And we saw the structure of the speech where Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar very clearly laid out the whole thinking and the direction of his entire movement. So we saw that in the beginning of the speech, or we can say the undelivered speech, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar is trying to give the narration or the contemporary narration of the problem of the caste, and he is discussing various sort of approaches by the people to handle it, as we can say. And then he talks about the historical political reforms and the social reforms, and he tries to show as to how the political reforms succeeded the social reforms, and in that the whole spirit of these social reforms was killed. And also he is trying to focus on the narrowness of the social reforms that was undertaken by the Indians. And then he tries to show that without social change or social reform or the religious reform, the political reform or the political organization cannot come into being. And then he also discusses the approaches of the socialists, and he tries to show that the economic approach to solving the problem of the caste is not going to work. And then in the famous line he says that you cannot have political reforms, you cannot have economic reforms unless you kill the monster. And that monster which Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar is talking about is the monster of caste. And after discussing the contemporary issues of the problem of the discrimination that arises due to the caste psychology, he goes on citing various examples about the presence of the caste atrocities. And we have seen that he has cited examples from all over the country. And then he takes on the various defenders of the caste system. So some of the people were trying to defend the caste system as the division of labor, but Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar tries to say or spell out that it's the division of laborers, and then he goes on into depth of that particular analysis as to how it is not the division of the labor, but how it is the division of the laborers. And then he takes on the biological defense and the economic efficiency approach, and then he tries to show how hollow or shallow the Hindu society is. According to his analysis of the Hindu society, there is no Hindu society, it is just a myth. So he says that the name Hindu is the foreign name given by the foreign invaders. Then he also talks about the humanity in the so-called Hindu society, and he tries to show that how the tribals have been neglected by the so-called Hindu society, and thus he is trying to show that the Hindu society has no human character. Then he also discusses the Shuddhi and the Sanghatan, and in this process he tries to argue against all these various defenders of the caste system. And then after discussing all these evils of the caste systems and taking very analytically the various perspective in support of the caste system, he put forth his own scheme of the construction of the society, which is, according to Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, is the society based on liberty, equality and fraternity. Then we have seen as to how he has discussed various ways of looking at fraternity, liberty and then equality. And then after discussing his own ideal society or his ideal organization of the society, he comes back to various ideals that have been put forward by the other people. So it's a very clear scheme of the things which is laid down in this page. So he discusses the ideal of the society which is supported by the Arya Samajist, which is the Chaturvarna. And then in a very deep way, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar goes on showing how even the mere labels like the Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra and Vaishya, how mere these labels can give rise to the social conflict. And we have seen as to how it is very close to the Buddha's conception of the dependent origination, as to how the whole process of naming something gives rise to the conflict eventually. Then he talks about the various inefficiencies in the scheme of Chaturvarna. For example, he talks about what will be the position of the women in the Chaturvarna. And then he talks about the economic inefficiency of the Chaturvarna scheme, as to, he says that the economy is changing all the time, it's dynamic. How you are going to fix up the static social order into the ever dynamic economic situation. So after discussing or argumenting against the scheme of Chaturvarna, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar asks a very fundamental question. And we are going to start with that fundamental question. There is no doubt, in my opinion, that unless you change your social order, you can achieve little by way of progress. You cannot mobilize the community, either for defense or for offense. You cannot build anything on the foundations of caste. You cannot build a nation, and you cannot build a morality. Anything that you will build on the foundations of caste will crack and will never be whole. So these few words are to be noted very promptly here. Nation morality cannot be founded on the basis of the caste. And then he raises a fundamental questions. He described the problem, he went into various details of the problems, he took on various defenders of the caste system, and now he is trying to give us the solution. And that is what it is. He says, how to bring about the reform of the Hindu social order. In a way, how to abolish caste. Because the speech, the direction that the speech is taking is from understanding the problem, understanding the situation, and the scheme of the things which have to be applied in order to attain to the desired end. So with the desire in the mind, we have to again come back to the problem and look at it from the desired end which we are trying to seek. So he says, how to abolish caste. There is a view that in the reform of caste, the first step to take is to abolish subcaste. So there is a view that says that if you can abolish the subcaste, the caste system will be abolished. And Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar goes on showing that such is not the case. If we go on abolishing the subcaste might become the one singular bigger caste, and that might not ultimately end the caste system. And in order to defend his argument, he cites the case of various castes all over India. For example, the condition of Brahmins in the North India is very different from the Brahmins in the South India. Their culture, their language, their everything is so different, and it varies from region to region. And such is the case with all various castes. So he says that abolition of the caste within the subcaste, within the caste, is not going to solve the problem. And then he says that it may happen that the process may stop with the abolition of subcaste. In that case, the abolition of subcaste will only help to strengthen the caste, and that's what we have seen in the Indian history. For example, if we look at the Brahmin caste, because they have been to somewhat or to some extent successful in abolishing their own subcaste, they have formed an all India homogeneous group. He says the abolition of subcaste will only help to strengthen the caste and make them more powerful and therefore more mischievous. This is a very important statement. He says that if we start abolishing the subcaste, for example, if you have to understand this, say if there is a Brahmin caste, and within the Brahmin caste there are many subcastes like Saraswat, so on and so forth. So he says that if we begin with the abolition of subcaste, when we start the process of abolition of the subcaste, in its place there will be a strengthened caste in a more powerful way, and it will emerge in a more mischievous way. And then he says that this remedy is neither practicable nor effective. So abolition of the subcaste, he says that it's neither practicable nor effective. Now you have to follow this argument very thorough, and we are going to follow this argument very thorough today. And then he says that there is another plan of action for abolition of caste is to begin with inter-caste dinners. Let there be many inter-caste dinners. And he says that in his opinion it is an inadequate remedy. So you have to keep these words in your mind. The abolition of the subcaste is nor effective, neither practicable nor effective. The interdining is an inadequate remedy. And then he says that he is convinced that the real remedy is intermarriages. Follow the argument very thorough, because we have to really look at Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar's argument as to how the caste can be abolished. And he says that the real remedy is intermarriage. The real remedy for breaking caste is intermarriage. Nothing else will serve as the solvent of caste. So now Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar stops here, and he goes on praising the work of Jat Paat Todak Mandal as to how they are encouraging the inter-caste marriages or the intermarriages between various castes. So he says, he addresses the members of the Jat Paat Todak Mandal, and he says, you have located the source of disease. That is the source of the disease that you have located. And he raises another question: is your prescription the right prescription for the disease? So whatever prescription that you have given in order to abolish the caste, is it the right prescription? And then he raises a few questions. Why is it that a large majority of Hindus do not interdine and do not intermarry? Why is it that your cause is not popular? Why people don't intermarry? There can be only one answer to this question, and it is that interdining and intermarriage are repugnant to the beliefs and dogmas which the Hindus regard as sacred. So why the Hindus don't interdine or intermarry is because it's against their religious system or religious belief. And he says in a very famous statement that caste is not a physical object like a wall of bricks or a line of barbed wire which prevents the Hindus from commingling and which has therefore to be pulled down. Then he roars, caste is a notion of mind. It is a state of mind. The destruction of caste does not therefore mean the destruction of a physical barrier. It means a notional change. It means a notional change. And then he extends his argument further. He says, Hindus observe caste not because they are inhuman or wrong-headed. They observe caste because they are deeply religious. Because they believe in certain dogmas that their behavior automatically gets operated based on those dogmas. So they are not inhuman, they are not wrong-headed. What is wrong is their belief system, is their notion, is their attitude that is wrong. And then he says, if this is correct, then obviously the enemy you must grapple with is not the people who observe caste, but the Shastras which teach them this religion of caste. Now this is a very subtle way, in a very subtle way Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar has brought into open light the real source of the caste, and which is the belief in the sacredness of the Shastras, which people believe to be very sacred. And then, as if he tries to pinpoint to the real issue in the removal of the caste system and the removal of untouchability. He says, reformers working for the removal of untouchability, including Mahatma Gandhi, do not seem to realize that the acts of the people are merely the results of their belief inculcated upon their minds by the Shastras, and that people will not change their conduct until they cease to believe in the sanctity of Shastras on which their conduct is founded. So he says, he gives like two solutions. He says, make every man and woman free from the thraldom of Shastras. So make people free from the slavery of the religious scriptures. And the second, cleanse their minds of the pernicious notions founded on the Shastras. If we do these two things, what will happen? He or she will interdine and intermarry without your telling him or her to do so. So two ways. First is that the people should be free from the slavery of the Shastras. And second, cleanse their minds of the pernicious notions founded on the Shastras. If we can do these two things, people will automatically start to interdine and intermarry. Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar goes in the very depth of the issue which we are going to do today. So he says that you must take the stand that the Buddha took. You must take the stand which Guru Nanak took. You must not only discard the Shastras, you must deny their authority as did Buddha and Nanak. And we have seen that this speech came after the very famous declaration at Yevala. Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar declared that he is not going to die a Hindu. And after the round table conference, he made it clear that this communal award or this separate Reformed MacDonald Award has really did very wrong to my community. It is trying to show that we are Hindus, and as a matter of fact, we are not Hindus. So it's completely adrift. So he says that if you understand the problem in its totality like this, he says, what is your chance of success? And then he talks about the various reformation. He says that there is a secular reform and there is a religious reform. Understand these two aspects. One, there is a secular reform and there is a religious reform, and the religious reforms have two approaches. One approach is the reform accords with the principles of the religion and merely invites people who have departed from it to revert to them and to follow them. So that's the one aspect of the religious reform, and there is another aspect in the area of the religious reform, that is the reform which not only touches the religious principles but is diametrically opposed to those principles and invites people to depart from and to discard their authority and to act contrary to those principles. So there are two types of reforms. One is a secular reform, and there is another type of reform, that is a religious reform, and within the category of the religious reform there are two corollaries or two categories of the further religious reform, that is which support the religion, and another religious reform is completely opposed to the religious reform. And Babasaheb says the destruction of caste is a reform which falls under the third category. The Hindus hold to the sacredness of the social order. Caste has a divine basis. You must therefore destroy the sacredness and divinity with which caste has become invested. In the last analysis, this means you must destroy the authority of the Shastras and the Vedas. So after describing in general the ways and means to destroy the caste, Babasaheb Ambedkar goes on into the proper ways and means which are very important in order to abolish the caste. And Babasaheb shows, or Babasaheb expresses his opinion that it is a very impossible task to abolish the caste. And he goes into that as to why it is very difficult to abolish the caste, because the Brahmins have shown a very hostile attitude to the abolition of the caste. Because the Brahmins have shown very hostile attitude to the abolition of the caste, it's very difficult to annihilate the caste. So here is a very famous line which Babasaheb has given and which I am going to read for you. He says, people sometimes ask the idle question, why the Pope does not introduce this or that reform? Pay your attention to this particular example that Babasaheb gave. Why the Pope does not introduce this or that reform? The true answer is that a revolutionist is not the kind of man who becomes a Pope, and that a man who becomes a Pope has no wish to be a revolutionist. I am going to read it again. Why the Pope does not introduce this or that reform? The true answer is that a revolutionist is not the kind of man who becomes a Pope, and that a man who becomes a Pope has no wish to be a revolutionist. So the term Brahmin reformist is a contradictory term in itself. It's a very contradictory term if somebody is trying to say that he is a Brahmin reformer. Unless we take away that name and really do away with the caste, the true reforms or the true abolition of the caste cannot take place. The Sultan could not, if he would, change the religion of the Islamic world, but even if he could do so, it is the very highest degree improbable that the head of Islam should wish to overthrow the religion of Muhammad. So there is kind of the internal and external factors which keeps the status quo. Babasaheb says, I think these remarks apply equally to the Brahmins of India, and one can say with equal truth that if a man who becomes a Pope has no wish to become a revolutionary, a man who is born a Brahmin has much less desire to become a revolutionary. Indeed, to expect a Brahmin to be a revolutionary in matters of social reform is as idle as to expect the British Parliament, as was said by Leslie Stephen, to pass an act requiring all blue-eyed babies to be murdered. Then here in a very famous paragraph, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar goes on describing the intellectual class of the society, the intellectual class that gives guidance to the society, and he shows very clearly as to how Brahmins as the intellectual class is a complete failure when it comes to the reformation of the society. And I am not going to go much into details of that. And then he again goes on arguing that there is no place for rationalism or to question in Hinduism, because according to the scheme of things in the Hinduism, you have to accept whatever written in the religious scriptures. There is no scope to attack on the Hindu scriptures. Now we are entering into a very complex area, and it's a very interesting area to really enter into. So here, now when Babasaheb discusses these whole things, he comes to a very single phrase around which he will have his argument directed at. And that pivotal phrase is destruction of religion. Destruction of religion. And here Babasaheb Ambedkar very deeply discusses the philosophy of religion, which is quite an unusual task in 1935 to discuss the philosophy of the religion. And these passages which follow in the speech are so deep in terms of the concepts that if we try to understand them, it's going to take us into various arena of the knowledge, because they are so deep and so important. So he says, some may not understand what I mean by destruction of religion. Some may find the idea revolting to them, and some may find it revolutionary. Let me therefore explain my position. And he comes and tries to explain his position. He says that I do not know whether you draw a distinction between principles and rules. Now we have to bear in the mind these two very important words, principles and rules, because this is where the whole argument comes into fruition. This is where we can see the whole logic, the whole cream of the speech coming onto the surface. This is where lies the real remedy, and this is where lies the clear-cut direction for the individual's life, because it is not just a speech about the abolition of the caste, but it's about how the new society is going to become, or how the new society is coming into being. He says, and this is going to be the evaluating tool for us in order to see whether we are really advancing in this direction. He says, I do not know whether you draw a distinction between principles and rule, but I do. Rules are practical. Rules are practical. They are habitual ways of doing things according to prescription. But principles are intellectual. They are useful methods of judging things. So, the first category is the category of the rules. Rules are practical. They are habitual ways of doing things according to prescription. But principles are intellectual. They are useful methods of judging things. That's the first distinction. Rules seek to tell an agent just what course of action to pursue. Principles do not prescribe a specific course of action. Principles do not prescribe a specific course of action. Rules, like cooking recipes, do tell just what to do and how to do it. A principle such as that of justice. Justice is a principle, it's not a rule. It's a principle. Supplies the main head by reference to which he is to consider the bearings of his desires and purpose. It guides him in his thinking by suggesting to him the important consideration which he should bear in mind. Now this is a very important distinction between the rules and the principles. Rules are like the receipts, and the principle is like the justice. So justice is a principle, equality is a principle. It's not a rule, it's a principle. This difference between rules and principles makes the act done in pursuit of them different in quality and in content. Doing what is said to be good by virtue of a rule and doing good in the light of a principle are two different things. Very important distinction. I am going to read it again. Doing what is said to be good by virtue of a rule, and doing good in the light of a principle are two different things. The principle may be wrong, but the act is conscious and responsible. The principle may be wrong, but the act is conscious and responsible. The rule may be right, but the act is mechanical. Very important distinction which Babasaheb Ambedkar is drawing here. And if we understand it, to my mind, we understand much of what follows in Babasaheb's life. A religious act may not be correct act, but must at least be a responsible act. Because the rules have no responsibility, you just do it mechanically. But the principles have the responsibility and you do it consciously. To permit of this responsibility, religion must mainly be a matter of principles. A religion must mainly be the matter of the principle. It cannot be a matter of rules. A religion cannot be a matter of rules. The moment it degenerates into rules, it ceases to be religion. Very important, very subtle, very, very important. As it kills responsibility, which is the essence of a truly religious act. Responsibility, we can say, is the essence of the truly religious act. Now, a lot of the philosophers of religion, they are grappling with these kind of problems as to what is the truly religious act. And Babasaheb makes it very clear. Responsibility is the truly religious act. What is this Hindu religion? Is it a set of principles or is it a code of rules? What is it? Now the Hindu religion as contained in the Vedas and the Smritis is nothing but a mass of sacrificial, social, political, sanitary rules and regulations. It's kind of a whole regulatory system. The Hinduism is not a religion according to Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar's definition of the word religion. Because religion is a matter of principle, it's a matter of responsibility, while the Hindu religion is not at all about responsibility, it's about mechanical things, it's about the rules. What is called religion by Hindus is nothing but a multitude of commands and prohibitions. What they designate as a Hindu religion is nothing but a multitude of commands and prohibitions. Religion, in the sense of spiritual principles, truly universal, applicable to all races, to all countries, to all times, is not to be found in them. The religion of principle is the universal religion. But Hindu religion is not the universal religion because it's not applicable to all races, it's not applicable to all countries, it's not applicable in all times. And if it is, it does not form the governing part of a Hindu life. Thus, for a Hindu, dharma means commands and prohibitions is clear from the way the word dharma is used in Vedas and Smritis and understood by commentators. To put it in a plain language, what the Hindus call religion is really law or at best legalized class ethics. Very deep examination of the Hindu religion. Frankly, I refuse to call this code of ordinances as religion. Also says that all this codification, all these ordinances, all these commands and prohibitions, I declare not to call them a religion. So technically, if we are trying to look at the word religion and we are trying to define the word religion as the matter of principles and as the matter of responsibility, the Hindu religion doesn't fall in the category of the religion. Very meticulous. The way now Babasaheb goes into the matter is very meticulous. In this particular scheme of the things, there is no loyalty to ideals, there is only conformity to commands. But the worst evil of this code of ordinances is that the laws it contains must be same yesterday, today and forever. It's Sanatan. It's applicable today, tomorrow and day after tomorrow, because it's the sacred command. And it's not only true about Hinduism, but if we study all the monolithic, all the theistic religion, we find that there is this kind of perpetuity attached to the religions. And if we look at Buddhism very closely, we can clearly see that it's the religion. It's the religion in the technical term as Babasaheb has described, but it also has all these attributes which Babasaheb tried to define. So Babasaheb says, so long as people look upon it as religion, they will not be ready for a change, because the idea of religion is generally speaking not associated with the idea of change. So long as the people look at Hinduism as the religion, they will not bring any change. But the idea of law is associated with the idea of change, because the law changes all the time according to the circumstances. And the law is capable of changing, but the religion is very static. People try to have their full grip on the religion. They don't want to change the religion, but they are very open to changing the laws. So, according to Babasaheb, the Hindu religion is nothing but the law, old and archaic. While I condemn a religion of rules, I must not be understood to hold the opinion that there is no necessity for a religion. So Babasaheb Ambedkar has defined or extended the scope of the religion. So it is not just applicable to this Hindu religion, but whatever religion exists on this earth, we can apply the same test in order to see their viability to the humanity. So very important test that Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar has given. I agree with Edmund Burke when he says that true religion is the foundation of society. Now what is the true religion? The religion of responsibility. What is the true religion? The religion of the principles. And that religion or that category of the phenomena is the true foundation of the society, the basis on which all true civil government rests and both their sanction. Consequently, when I urge that these ancient rules of life be annulled, I am anxious that its place shall be taken by a religion of principles. Swasa says that the religion of rules must vanish, the religion of law must go, but the religion of principles must come, which alone can lay claim to be a true religion. Indeed, I am so convinced of the necessity of religion that I feel I ought to tell you in outline what I regard as necessary items in this religious reform, and Babasaheb Ambedkar gives the 4 items for the religious reforms of the Hindus. Very important. There should be one and only one standard book of Hindu religion acceptable to all Hindus and recognized by all Hindus. This of course means that all other books of Hindu religion such as Vedas, Shastras and Puranas, which are treated as sacred, authoritative, must by law cease to be so, and the preaching of any doctrine, religious or social, contained in these books should be penalized. And this is very true because they are anti-constitutional. Now if we look at this particular text from the constitutional viewpoint, they are anti-constitution, they are anti-democracy. Like for example, the Manusmriti is totally anti-constitution. Second, it should be better if priesthood among Hindus was abolished. But as it seems to be impossible, the priesthood must be at least cease to be hereditary. Every person who professes to be a Hindu must be eligible for being a priest. It shall be provided by law that no Hindu shall be entitled to be a priest unless he has passed an examination prescribed by the state and holds a sanad from the state permitting him to practice. So it's not come from your father to you. The priesthood will be a matter of examination. You have to pass the examination like the lawyers. They have to pass the examination in order to have the sanad to really practice. So Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar suggests that the priest will not come from one particular caste of the Hindus. They will be coming from all caste of the Hindus, and they will have to appear for the examination and have a sanad to practice, to preach. No ceremony performed, third, by a priest who does not hold a sanad shall be deemed to be valid in law and should be made penal for a person who has no sanad to officiate as a priest. So if you don't have a sanad and if you are performing certain rites, you will be penalized. Fourth, a priest should be the servant of the state and should be subject to disciplinary action by the state in the matter of his morals, belief and worship, in addition to his being subject along with other citizens to the ordinary law of land. And then he talks about there should be an examination for the priest, just like the civil services examination. So if you can have this kind of a 5 reforms in Hinduism, then it can become the religion of principles. And what they should do, what the Hindus should do, and he prescribes them, he gives them advice. Whether you do that or you do not, you must give a new doctrinal basis to your religion, a basis that will be in consonance with liberty, equality and fraternity, in short with democracy. I am no authority on the subject, but I am told that for such religious principle as will be consonance with liberty, equality and fraternity, it may not be necessary for you to borrow from foreign sources, and that you could draw from such principles on the Upanishads. Whether you could do so without a complete remolding, a considerable scrapping and chipping off the ore they contain is more than I can say. But you have to do that. You have to make your religion in consonance with liberty, equality and fraternity. This means a complete change in the fundamental notions of life. It means a complete change in the values of life. It means a complete change in outlook and in attitude towards men and things. It means conversion, but if you do not like the word, I will say it means new life. I have to call it the religious conversion, but it can be a new life. Very rich with the new imagery. If we read the speech, there are so many beautiful images and the concepts which are very deep. But a new life cannot enter a body that is dead. New life can enter only in a new body. The old body must die before a new body come into existence and a new life can enter into it. To put it simply, the old must cease to be operative before the new can begin to enliven and to pulsate. This is what I mean when I said you must discard the authority of Shastras and destroy the religion of the Shastras. So with the four final points we are going to end, which I think we must cover. So there are some questions which Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar is trying to put in forth. The Hindus must therefore examine their religion and then morality in terms of their survival value. Because morality and religion are not mere matters of likes and dislikes. You may dislike exceedingly a scheme of morality which, if universally practiced within a nation, would make that nation the strongest nation on the face of the earth. So such is the value of the morality. If the nation is moral, it is going to be the very strong nation. Secondly, the Hindus must consider whether they should conserve the whole of their social heritage or select what is helpful and transmit to the future, only that much and no more. Thirdly, they must not cease to worship the past as supplying its ideal. Because an individual can live only in the present. The present is not just something which comes after the past, much less something produced by it. It is what life is in leaving the past behind it. The study of past products will not help us to understand the present. A knowledge of the past and its heritage is of great significance when it enters into the present, but not otherwise. So the Hindus must not cease to worship the past as supplying the ideals. Fourthly, the Hindus must consider whether the time has not come for them to recognize that there is nothing fixed, nothing eternal, nothing sanatan, that everything is changing, that change is the law of life for individuals and as well as for the society. In a changing society, there must be a constant evolution of old values, and the Hindus must realize that if there must be standards to measure the acts of men, there must also be readiness to revise those standards. And then in the last paragraph, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar hammers his final blow. He says that the abolition of the caste is the national cause. It's not the individual cause, it's the national cause. And he says, caste is no doubt primarily the breath of Hindus, but the Hindus have fouled the air all over and everybody is infected, Sikhs, Muslims and Christians. You therefore deserve the support of all those who are suffering from this infection, Sikh, Muslim and Christians. Yours is more difficult than the other national cause, namely Swaraj. So Babasaheb says that the abolition of the caste is more important national cause than the cause of Swaraj. There is no use having Swaraj if you cannot defend it. More important than the question of defending Swaraj is the question of defending the Hindus under the Swaraj. In my opinion, only when the Hindu society becomes a casteless society that it can hope to have strength enough to defend itself. Without such internal strength, Swaraj for Hindus may turn out to be only a step towards slavery. Goodbye and good wishes for your success. Thank you.